is something that has come out from the UN, from the WHO some years ago, in which they promoted the fact that why don't you take people who are less well educated and provide health care through them. Now, that doesn't say, and task shifting, first of all, must be clearly defined. What is task shifting? Every country that I go to, task shifting is a little bit different in their minds, right? And we have difficulty at the World Medical Association because when we talk about task shifting in a group like yours, everyone's got a little different feel of it. In some people, task shifting means that you shift tasks to nurses. There are some countries, such as I think, and you can confirm this for me, in the Netherlands, some major tasks in some centers have been given to nurses, colonoscopy, things like that. There's other countries that are much more conservative and will not shift tasks to anyone, no matter how competent they are whatsoever. So that's one area of task shifting where you look at competence and whether you delegate certain tasks to those groups who you yourself are reassured have the competence and the education and the clinical savvy for it. On the other hand, what we see in many less developed countries is task shifting means we'll give it to the lowest common denominator, the barefoot doctor type of model, and they provide primary care. And in many of those countries, primary care has disappeared, or practically disappeared, because government no longer funds it. They say, oh, it's being done. It's being done because we task shifted to these other people, not educated, not competent in many cases, not educated, not competent, and there is no continuity. It appears to be a cheap fix at first because government can now spend their money on something else, but on the other hand, in the short run and in the long run, it's disastrous. Patients don't have access to quality health care. Patients do not get the access to secondary and tertiary care if it's there, and primary care disappears. And in a country, you cannot build secondary and tertiary or elevated tertiary care if you don't have primary care. And so task shifting has had a huge impact on health care within the world itself, let alone these other things about the individual roles and competencies of other healthcare providers. So that's a brief overview of where we are with regards to workforce within the World Medical Association. There's some other areas we've looked at, positive practice environment, looking at another slide on that one. There's a whole area that we didn't talk about regulation with regards to the regulators. What about the competencies? What about the mobility, which I know there is some controversy within the European, within Europe itself with regards to how do you grade individual medical schools against each other, a politically extremely volatile and questionable for governments to get into. Yet on the other hand, there are standards, there are competencies that can be measured. There's no use doing that unless there's a political will to enforce that, but it is something that is extremely important. And we've had a couple of conferences on that already. All kinds of things with regards to definitions, etc. Interestingly, at this particular conference, it's a bit of a useless tidbit, but it speaks to immigration of physicians or health workforce. One of the people at that particular one in May 2008 got up and said, you know, in the Philippines, we have decreasing number of physicians and we have great difficulty with it. And he said the reason for that is because more and more physicians are going back to school to become nurses. Because nurses can immigrate to other countries and their education is accepted. So he said, every year I lose numbers of people off of the physician register because they're going back to become nurses so that they can then emigrate to Europe, to North America, to other places. Because their qualifications are accepted, whereas the qualifications for physicians are questioned, and they would have to, do other work or may not be accepted, ever be accepted. It's an interesting little quirk of sometimes you wonder why the numbers of physicians go down, and in individual countries, sometimes it's totally not what you expect. We've had that conference in Reykjavik, Iceland. And the last slide is about positive practice environment, the quality workplaces for quality care. Again, that comes back to one of the factors why physicians emigrate or move is because of the workplace, and the workplace can be very difficult in any country that you're in. We have to begin to look at awareness and understanding and support of all the stakeholders in that, because each and every one of you has a story that you could tell about the workplace in your environment or that you've seen that was not acceptable, right? That for you as a student, for you as a patient, for you as a family member, and how do we start to address those, partially because of the workforce migration, but also, more importantly, for the well-being and care of the patient themselves. So it's an area that I think is long overlooked and something that we have to get into, and does strike to, again, what we all have experienced in our medical education, sometimes the disruptive physician, the disrespectful physician, whether it's to you or all of us when we were students, etc. We have to start to address those people as well. No matter where they are in the hierarchy, it's not acceptable anymore, and we have to start looking at that for our own well-being, as well as that whole immigration question. So I'd like to thank you for hopefully setting the tone for some of your discussions in the next few days. I'd be only too happy to try to answer any questions or queries you have about the WMA.